Hey there, we're going to talk a little bit about where to go when we're serving and when the other team is serving. And we're going to talk specifically today about running a 5-1 offense and defense as well, which means we have one setter and potentially 5 hitters. This is the offense you see most in the pros, at international levels, and in university teams. We have a new position in this game, if you're coming to us from a 4-2, called the opposite. They play, as you might have guessed, opposite the setter. But first, let's talk about the overlap rule just to cover it. If you don't need to go over this again, you can skip forward to the rotations that we're going to talk about. This applies before the ball has been served by our team or the other team, this overlap rule. Once the server contacts the ball, we're allowed to switch our positions. And we can use this later when we talk about our 4-2, 5-1, or 6-2 offense. As a back row player, you can't line up in front of the player in front of you. Front row players can't line up behind the player behind them. So the player in 4 can't be behind the player in 5. And the player in zone 3 can't be behind the player in 6. And the player in 2 can't be behind the player in 1. You also can't cross over the player next to you. So the player in 4 can't be to the right of the player in zone 3. And the player in zone 2 can't be to the left of the player in zone 3, and so on. Same goes for the back row. So legally, we could all huddle in zone 4, so long as we all stayed on the correct side of the player or players to our sides and in front or behind us. If they wanted to, the 2 middle players could back all the way up, which is fine because the back row player stayed behind the front row player and they didn't overlap to the right or left of the people beside them. Or our middle back and right back players could shift to the right side, so long as they don't cross over each other or cross in front of the players in front of each of them. So that's the overlap rule, and it's going to let us do some kind of funky things when we get to our different rotations. So let's see how that applies to our 5-1. So we're going to look at each rotation where we're serving, and then when we're receiving, and where we go to hit the ball once we pass the ball to the setter. In a 5-1, we only have one setter and an opposite across from them. And the opposite these days is usually a big hitter from the right side and from the back row. In rotation 1, the setter is serving. As the server contacts the ball, our players move. Outside hitter 2 moves to the left side to block. The opposite moves to the right side to block. Outside hitter 1 moves to middle back to play defense, and middle blocker 2 moves to the left side to play defense. The setter, after they serve, moves to right back to play defense after she serves. Now, usually, we have a libero in the back row for a middle when they're not serving. In Europe, middles go back to serve, play defense while they're serving, and then leave the court for the libero when the other team sides out. When we're receiving in rotation 1, we try to isolate just 3 passers to handle the serve. Note that the libero and middle blocker, or middle blocker 2, and outside hitter 1 don't overlap to the side, and outside hitter 2 and setter 1, the only setter, don't overlap front to back. All the orange arrows show the overlap that we can't have front to back, and then the colored arrows show the side to side overlap that we can't have. Ideally, when we're running a 5-1, we want just the 3 here passing, the 2 outside hitters and the libero, if we can help it. Now, when the server contacts the ball on the other side, we can move into our attacking lanes. And in this rotation, it's up to the opposite and the outside hitter 2 to talk to each other about whether they stay on the left and right side where they line up, or if they switch after the ball goes over the net to the opponent. Now, in rotation 2, it's a little bit simpler. We don't have that odd case where the setter has to bolt from behind outside hitter 2 to the front row to get to their spot. In the back row, we only have 2 people switching spots, the setter and outside hitter 2, who's the server. And because the setter doesn't have to worry about the server overlapping them when they're back to serve, they can go right to right back in their defensive position. In the front row, the opposite's going to slide around behind the middle blocker to the right side to block, we want to leave that middle blocker on the net so that they're focused on the hitters on the other side of the net. When we're receiving serve, we want to get our setter as close to the net as possible, as close to their base position as possible, which means the opposite kind of hides against the net and the middle blocker stands out of the way on the right side. Now the arrows show that we're still not overlapping with any of the players behind or in front of us or to the sides. And you'll note here that the libero can't go any further to the right, otherwise they'd be too far past the setter, who is next to them in the back row. And the setter doesn't want to shift too far right either, past the second outside hitter. So we're a bit tight and we need to be conscious of where we're standing here. Again, our three passers are the libero and the two outsides. And when the server on the other side contacts the ball, we can move. The opposite slides out behind to the right side to get ready to hit on their natural position. Middle blocker comes around in front of the setter who gets that second touch, and the outside hitter can just pop outside. So that's rotation 2. Rotation 3, we have the setter is in 5 in this position. And outside hitter 1 is going to pinch over a little bit to let middle blocker 2 get set up right in the middle so they can just focus on the hitters on the other side. And when the ball is contacted, they're going to head off to the left side. The opposite is fine just where they are. And in the back row, when the middle blocker 1 hits the ball, setter is going to run over to the right back side to play defense. Outside hitter 2 is going to take a step back into 6 to play middle back defense. And then middle blocker 1 is going to go running all the way around to the left back position to play defense over there. They can also serve from the left side to make it easier on themselves and have less far to run. Depends on what's on the other side of the net. Now, when we're receiving serve, this is where we take advantage of that overlap rule again to organize our passers. So the setter's in the back row, so they can't go closer to the net than middle blocker 2. And the outside hitter 1 can shift all the way over to the left side, but not to the left of middle blocker 2. We do this so that the outside hitter has an easier time popping out to the left side to hit that ball on the left. Again, the arrows show that we're not overlapping with any players behind or in front of us or to the sides. These are the passers, again, our libero and our two outside hitters. And when the server on the other side contacts the ball, that's when we can move again. There's a bit of crossing here for the middle blocker 2, so they need to take a direct route to their spot and ideally keep an eye on the pass and to see where it's going so they're not getting in the way. In rotation 4, we've now got the setter in the front row. Opposite goes back to serve. The outside hitter and the setter are going to swap places behind the middle blocker so they can stay focused again on the hitters on the other side, and the setter can get over to the right side and the outside hitter to the left. In the back row, the opposite's just going to run straight ahead to play defense and right back where the setter was playing defense. Outside hitter 2 steps back into the middle back to play defense, and the libero scoots over. They've come in for the middle blocker 2 after they're done serving, and they're going to scoot over to the left back. Now, when we're receiving serve, again, we're stacking people over on that left side. We have everybody in the front row stacked over there. None of them can overlap to the sides, if you remember. And we kind of hide the opposite in the back row. If the opposite's a good passer, and maybe we need an extra passer in there, they can also step up and pass, but they need to make sure that they're to the right of the libero. Because this is where our overlaps are. You can see the green arrows are the people in the back row. The blue arrows are the people in the front row. And again, we have our three passers, the outside hitters and the libero. There's only two hitters in the front row, so we can start thinking about using the opposite to hit a ball out of the back row in D, or the outside hitter in the pipe. And those are the zones marked there. That means that they're attacking the ball from behind that 3-meter line. Okay, so if we get the ball back, we're in rotation 5 now. Outside hitter 1 is in the back row. We still have a front row setter. The setter is going to cross behind the middle blocker to get over to the right side to block. Otherwise, everybody else in the front row is going to stay where they are. And this is simple for the back row as well, because everyone's going to stay where they are. Outside hitter 1 is going to go to deep middle back to play defense, and we're good to go. When we're receiving in rotation 5, for the setter, this one's pretty easy. They get to stay right in the spot where we expect to pass that ball. The opposite can hide behind the libero and outside hitter 1 and go around behind them to get ready to hit a D ball. Or they can help out in reception if we're in trouble. And then middle blocker 2 can stay on the right side and hit a slide or another ball on the right side. Or swing around in front of the setter to hit a quick tempo ball. That's where you want to talk with your setter, have the two of you communicating. And you can see again, here's where the overlaps would be. So we need to make sure that we're not overlapping there. We have our same 3 passers, our outside hitter, our libero, and our other outside hitter. And when the serve comes, we can see how we shift to get into attacking mode. Again, we can think about where we place the middle blocker depending on the blockers on the other side of the net, the quality of the pass, and a few other things. Now in rotation 6, this isn't too bad either. Our server just has a long run over to their spot. And the outside hitter 2 is going to pop around behind the middle blocker 1 there to the left side. And the opposite and outside hitter just cross to play defense in right back and middle back. Like so. Middle blocker 2 would be subbed out for the libero. And in rotation 6, on serve receive, we can hide the opposite in the left back corner this time and pinch middle blocker 1 into the left corner so that that outside hitter can get over as far as they can to the left. So they can go and take a good approach for their swing. So middle blocker 1 here has to be smart, again, just like middle blocker 2 in an early rotation, and quick about getting their spot. So they want to keep an eye on the pass and see where it's going, so they're not getting in the way, especially if we have a bad pass. We've got our same 3 main passers there. And again, we can have the opposite pop in, just mindful of not crossing over outside hitter 1. They need to make sure that they stay to the left of them. And there we go when we get back in position. So the last thing we're going to show you is we're going to talk a little bit about the attacking zones. So we've talked a lot about the different positions we're getting to after we've passed the ball. This shows the different zones we might hit from. In the back rows, we have A, B, C, D, and pipe, where pipe A and D would be the most common. In the front row, the net is divided into 9 zones, and we ideally want our passes to the setter in zone 6. On the left side, for the outside hitters usually, and the opposite in that 1 rotation, we might call for a hut or a 4 for a high set to zone 1. So the 4 is just short for 14, where we're setting to zone 1, 4 feet above the net. On the right side, we might call for a red or a 9 for a relatively high set to zone 9, ideally a little lower than the high set to the left side would be, because the ball has less far to travel from the setter's hands. And then for middles, we have lots of options. But there's a shoot, or a 31, in zone 3, 1 foot above the net. That's a little ways away from the setter, who's in zone 6. Or they have a 1, which is short for 1 foot above the net in zone 5, or a back 1 in zone 7, 1 foot above the net. Or they can even slide all the way right, if the opposite is in the back row for a slide. But we'll start working on those soon. But for now, that's a quick overview of running a 5-1 and the different positions you want to be in. Hope you found that helpful, and hopefully that'll make things a little more clear, especially when we're on the court and we've got bodies instead of just colored dots.